So I'm not one to introduce people through their bios, usually because most people I introduce do more in a month than I can do in a lifetime. So the next person that gives me the wonderful, wonderful pleasure to introduce is, well, I've always had a passion for education, primarily around space, aerospace, and it was in 2005 that I began working on a project with the U.S. Department of Labor, and I met a wonderfully inspiring woman named Emily DeRocco, who really was instrumental in showing me how education for education's sake is interesting, it's good, but it's so important to make sure that we're making the connection between education and workforce development. And with workforce development, understanding how it's driving economic development at the regional level. And I always said when I moved back up here, if I could ever do what I've done in other areas around the country here, that I wanted to make sure that she was a part of it. So I want to introduce Emily DeRocco. I cannot thank you enough for coming up here in your busy schedule from D.C. to give us a fantastic message. So, ladies and gentlemen, Emily DeRocco.
So good afternoon, and thank you, Troy, for giving me a great excuse to come back to. Certainly the Commonwealth is home, but Northeast Pennsylvania is near and dear to my heart. Well, folks, human capital is one of the most critical issues facing U.S. manufacturers today, so I'm thrilled to see the number and the level and quality of both manufacturers and educators that have joined us for this summit today. I don't think your attention could be focused on anything more important to our nation's future. So thank you. But over the last few months, quite frankly, manufacturing has enjoyed something of a national spotlight, hasn't it? It's been one of the few industries to actually show consistent growth, adding over 280,000 jobs in the past year and a half. And surveys show us continued confidence in that growth among manufacturers. Pennsylvania manufacturers are experiencing a similar resurgence, I understand, and our tabulation is 17,000 jobs added in manufacturing here in the Commonwealth over that same time period. So we've been one of the few bright spots in an otherwise stagnant economy, and the newspapers and the commentators have certainly taken notice. Well, it's fitting, isn't it, that manufacturing should finally be getting such recognition, because it is indeed the industry that is truly vital to our economic and our national security. No other industry creates more value or has a higher multiplier effect. And this results in a 17% compensation premium for manufacturing workers nationwide and an incredible 44% compensation premium for workers here in Pennsylvania. Manufacturing, as you know, is also the leader in generating wealth from abroad, contributing nationally over 60% of the total value of U.S. exports, and an equally incredible 90% of Pennsylvania's exports. You know, that's truly amazing when we consider only 10% of your workforce is engaged in our industry. And I believe it's possible that there is more good news on the horizon. Recent reports from two of the biggest consulting firms in the world, the Boston Consulting Group and Accenture, have looked at what is euphemistically being called onshoring today. What their research shows is that manufacturers are discovering that China isn't as cheap as everyone thought. When you factor in everything from the shipping of goods to the availability of quality workers to the inflexibility of both the supply chain and the manufacturing specifics themselves, the cost of producing goods in the U.S. is actually very competitive with the Chinese cost, and we're just now beginning to realize that. And that doesn't even begin to account for the risk to your intellectual property, because let's face it, who are you going to sue if a Chinese firm steals your idea or your business process? Well, in any case, it's really nice to see manufacturing have the spotlight, and I do truly believe we're at the front end of a renaissance in United States manufacturing. But 6 months of good stories really can't undo 3 decades of negativity. That steady drumbeat that your congressman referred to of manufacturing is dying, stories and reports have caused real and very lasting damage to the image of our industry, and nowhere have the effects of that damage been greater than in the manufacturing workforce. You know, American society used to so greatly value and respect men and women who built things with their hands. At the turn of the last century, the greatest names in our country were either industrialists like Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie, or inventors like Thomas Edison and the Wright brothers. These were the men that all parents aspired their children to become. And this continued through the 20th century as high school graduates sought work at the local factory. Certainly the Valley understands that. And college graduates dreamed of becoming rocket scientists. Well, that began to change in the 70s and 80s because parents instead began to dream of their children only as doctors or lawyers or bankers. And guidance counselors, reacting to that, I believe, pushed students away from manufacturing careers towards college-appropriate careers. In most states, I have to tell you, the school systems responded to this shift in societal priorities and values by reducing or eliminating the once ubiquitous vo-tech programs in our K-12 systems. Fewer and fewer students were learning the skills needed to enter manufacturing careers or experiencing the excitement and the sense of accomplishment that comes from building and making things. Well, concurrent to these changes, and I know we have a few superintendents in the school, and I wish you could explain this to me, but concurrent to those changes and continuing, quite frankly, through today, this general malaise seems to have settled over public education in this country. Dropout rates have soared to over 30% of our high school students. Graduates lack the basic reading, writing, and mathematics skills needed in society in general. Enrollment in remediation courses in our college environment has dramatically increased, really burdening our entire education system with kind of an under-preparation tax. And employers, every one of them, have noted the decline in the basic workplace requirements like punctuality and work ethic. Well, the cumulative effect of these shifts has been to dramatically reduce the size and the quality of the pipeline of workers entering manufacturing today. And unfortunately, this could not have happened at a worse time for U.S. manufacturers. Because beginning in the late 70s and the early 80s and accelerating after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the introduction of the Internet, foreign manufacturers, particularly those in East Asia, began expanding and began to compete directly against U.S. firms. And this began that very difficult and very painful transformation of our manufacturing industry, a transformation that every manufacturer in this room has been engaged in. Well, the manufacturing sector that emerged from that transformation has been completely different from its predecessor. Computer-controlled robots and machines now produce and move goods. Clean suits are as common as hard hats. And workers are now responsible for programming and maintaining integrated systems and complex machinery. What had traditionally been a low-skilled, routinized workplace all of a sudden was a highly skilled, customized, and integrated workplace. Meanwhile, manufacturers were constantly under pressure to increase their innovation capacity. To remain competitive, they either had to regularly create and produce new products or new product features. So this added a creativity and critical thinking element to the skills required for an individual to pursue a manufacturing job, further distinguishing what we knew as traditional manufacturing from advanced manufacturing, which describes our sector today. Well, not surprisingly, it was right around this time that we began to hear reports from manufacturers about a skills gap. They were unable to find workers who were qualified to step in and contribute to their operations. And this was a real threat because U.S. manufacturers were banking on their ability to produce high-value goods and stay ahead of those foreign competitors through innovation. Well, without a skilled workforce, their innovation engine would grind to a halt. So for the past decade or so, I really have watched manufacturers manage to bridge that skills gap through a combination of productivity improvements, poaching from other manufacturers, and kind of a liberal supply of duct tape. But time and luck are about to run out. Between this coming renaissance of manufacturing and the impending baby boomer retirement, manufacturers are going to have to fill millions of positions in the next decade. In fact, we're already beginning to see this nationally. In our latest nationwide survey of U.S. manufacturers, 32% reported that they were experiencing moderate to serious skills shortages with jobs going unfilled. And this was in the summer of 2009, the height of the recession, the highest unemployment, and the highest loss of jobs. We are right now working on an update of that skills gap survey. And though the results aren't final yet, the early indications are that that number experiencing a shortage will at least double. So the time is right, it seems to me, for manufacturers to change the way they have approached and managed this human resource or human capital challenge. And we at the Manufacturing Institute actually believe we have an important solution to offer. The core premise of our solution is that in manufacturing, we have standards for every imaginable input and output, don't we? Whether it's the composition of steel, the tolerance of machines, or the failure rate of a part, every manufacturer in this room can give me down to the third decimal point what is acceptable for input and output. So why do we not have a system that allows manufacturers to be as rigorous in the standards they apply to their most critical asset, human capital? These standards should not come in the form used by traditional education as we know it, which measures seat time aligned to credit hours. Instead, our standards will be competency-based, demonstrated through mastery and proficiency, and verified by third-party certification. To develop our solution, which we call the NAM-endorsed Manufacturing Skills Certification System, we joined with several other leading industry groups that are internationally recognized to create a system of nationally portable, industry-recognized credentials and the learning standards and learning content associated with those credentials that certify that an individual in fact possesses the basic skills required for entry-level jobs across 14 sectors of the manufacturing industry. For you visual learners, our system can be envisioned as a pyramid of skill certifications with an initial focus on the bottom-tier entry-level worker. First, does he or she possess the personal effectiveness skills necessary to work? For example, will they show up for work? Second, the foundational academic competencies to work and learn in the business environment. And for manufacturers, those academic competencies are applied math, reading, locating, and using information. The third tier is general workplace competencies, such as are they problem solvers, can they work in a team, do they understand health and safety standards, and then finally there is a comprehensive set of stackable credentials in the technical skills related to basic manufacturing processes ranging from production to logistics to machining and metal forming to quality assurance, safety and health, and technology. Our foundational skill sets are grounded in the credentials of ACT's National Career Readiness Certificate, and the stackable technical skill sets are covered by the Manufacturing Skill Standards Council's Production Technician Series, the American Welding Society's Welding or Materials Joining Credentials, the National Institute of Metalworking Skills Machining and Metal Forming skill sets, topped off by the Society of Manufacturing Engineers Technologist certifications. Now, what's different about these certifications today, as we have organized them in a set of stackable credentials and translated the learning standards and the learning content into both secondary and post-secondary educational pathways, and then align those educational pathways to the jobs, occupations, and related salaries and benefits of a manufacturing worker as he or she enters the industry and progresses or advances.